Good morning. Good to be with you again this morning. I'm standing out here by the goal post here, and I've got the bleachers in behind me there, as you can see. And I've been taking this series from the bleachers. Again, I just figured I'd do a little bit of a different take today. Anyways, continuing to build on the four pillars of a healthy Christian business leader, and the pillars are healthy relationships, biblical financial values, biblical spirituality, and balanced living. And because there's a fifth week, I'm doing a series on Proverbs this week. Proverbs 25 for business leaders. And that's been our focus. So far this week, we have covered things like humility in leadership is better than arrogance. And we talked about the importance of that, the significance of not puffing ourselves up. Tuesday, winning an argument and losing the war. And so again, the significance that it's not always about coming to our own defense. And then yesterday, it's all about communication. And the reason it's all about communication is because it's all about communication. Communication will either make or break your relationships at home, at work, and wherever in the community as well. Well, today, we're going to be talking about living in community can be tricky. And I like standing here by the goalpost because we all have goals in life. And this is a reminder for us that we need to set some goals when it comes to living in community together. And hopefully these principles today will help with setting that. Good morning, Abby. Good to have you here this morning. So COVID-19 has really made things a bit tricky when it comes to community living. And it's made the reality that community living can be tricky a little bit more evident as well. Families that already were struggling, we know that they're struggling more, and that there are situations that are arising because of having to be in community and working from home and all of that extra stresses that have been placed upon families and upon businesses as well. Of course, business communities are finding things more challenging now than ever. And certainly here in Ontario and in Canada, we're experiencing that for sure. So Proverbs 25, starting in verse 16, we read this: honey is good, but do not eat too much of it, or you will be sick. And don't visit your neighbor's home too often, or they will begin to hate you. A person who gives false testimony against a neighbor is deadly as a club, a sword, or a sharp arrow. Never depend on a liar in times of trouble. It's like chewing with a bad tooth or walking with a crippled foot. Singing happy songs to a sad person is as foolish as taking a coat off on a cold day and mixing soda and vinegar. If your enemies are hungry, give them something to eat. If they are thirsty, give them some water. This will make them feel the burning pain of shame, and the Lord will reward you for being good to them. It is better to live in a small corner of the roof than to share the house with a woman who is always arguing. And then verse 27, just as eating too much honey is not good, it is not good for people to always be looking for honor. So, what are the principles that we can learn, that we can take to heart today that might help us in setting goals for how we're going to live in community today, tomorrow, and in the weeks and months to come? Well, I've got a number of principles I just want to share with you. First of all, compliments, they're nice. When someone talks nice about you and they're in essence, they're giving you honey and they're just, that's great to a point. But eventually, that gets old. Eventually, you just say, okay, enough. I mean, I've been there where you have someone, they talk about you in a way that you just say, look, this is just embarrassing now. And so please, recognize that. And then don't outstay your welcome. That idea of visiting your neighbor, and if you do it too often, then they're going to hate you. I've seen this where people who are best friends, and they want to go on vacation together, and they're doing everything together, and then eventually they grow to hate each other. There is a place for being together, and there's a place for being apart. and especially when it comes to our neighbors and our friends. And so we want to be careful with that. And that can also be true at work. I know for myself, for years, I would say what I want to be careful of is not outstaying my usefulness. And if I outstay my usefulness, then it's time for me to go. And so at work, that can be a reality as well. And then don't twist the truth about your neighbor or your neighbor or your co-worker. He talks about the person who tells false scenarios about their neighbor. They've become to their neighbor like a deadly club or a sword or a spear. And so we want to recognize that we need to be careful how we talk about the people around us. And that we talked about that more yesterday when we talked about communication. But that's still true in this passage as well, because it's destructive. It can destroy your relationship with your neighbor. It can destroy your relationship at work, and it can destroy your relationships at home. And then make sure of your source. Verse 19: a liar causes pain like a broken tooth. I don't know if you've ever had a broken tooth. I have. And you're eating along, and then all of a sudden the cold hits that tooth, or something hot hits that tooth, and it's like sharp pains. Well, a liar is like that. And so if you trust the liar, if you listen to the lie and you trust that lie and you continue to follow after that lie, it only leads to pain. And then know when leaving someone to deal with their own grief in their own way is a good thing. Verse 20, he talks about that. Not everybody wants to have a song sung to them when they're sad. I put here, not everyone wants you to sing them a sad song. So oftentimes we have this idea that when someone is grieving, when someone's going through a hard time, maybe they lost their job, maybe they lost someone they love, maybe they lost their business because of COVID-19, maybe they've become separated because of the situation of COVID in their home, and there's just been too many struggles. And we want to come in and quote-unquote rescue them and make them feel good. Sometimes they just don't want to feel good right now. They want to deal with their grief. And we need to know when it's okay to let someone deal with their own grief. And then verse 21 and 22 are significant verses. He says, be kind to your enemies. Jesus quotes that same quote and reminds us of the same thing. That when you're doing so, you're heaping coals of fire upon them, shame upon them. Now, it's not the intent of bringing shame upon them. That's not the intent. The intent is that they would repent, that they'd become your friend because you're being kind to them. But if they don't become your friend, don't worry, because God will reward you for being kind to your enemies. And that's a significant reminder to us about how we ought to deal with those difficult people. And then verse 24, and I was a little bit, kind of terrified of dealing with verse 24. It's that verse about it's better to live on the corner of the roof than in a house with a cantankerous wife. But here's the thing. I think that principle is not just in home. It is a principle that applies both ways, and it could be said of a man as well. It's better for a woman to live on the corner of the roof than to live in a home with an abusive husband or a cantankerous husband. So sometimes people need space, and it's wise to give them the space that they need at that time. Giving someone room to work out their issues is not a bad thing. If you know that there's somebody that has issues and they need to work through those issues, give them the room to work through that. That could be your spouse, but it could also be someone that you work with, and frankly, it could be someone you work for. That they just need space, and they need to work through some issues. Now, maybe sometimes they need some help, and maybe you can be that person, but maybe you're not that person, and maybe they need some space. So today, as you go about your day, here's my question for you. What is your goal when it comes to community living? Community living at home, community living at work, community living at church, community living in your community, your society. What is your goal? Are you helping the community to function well? And then may we be better at living in community. May the Lord bless you. Have a great day, and I'll see you again tomorrow over here by the bleachers.